That's right. That's right. That's right. And one, we're about to go in on the health, fitness, nutrition tip. That much more. You already know the trajectory of the channel. You know what it is. We gotta if we're gonna talk fitness, we gotta talk nutrition, diet. That's a big thing. Everybody's looking for the magic bullet, the magic pill, what to eat. There's a lot of confusion about that. It's totally insane, but it's actually pretty fun. There's so much going on behind the scenes, actual diet wars going on from vegan, vegetarian to carnivore to even sugar diet. Now we're gonna talk about that soon. But I got one of my homies I've known, man. It's been a minute. We coming up on a good 15 plus years. Homie I met way back in Oakland at the gym. I say way back in time. We both still live in Oakland. But we're gonna talk about this carnivore diet situation. It's extremely interesting. Mutual friend of ours was talking about low carb carnivore, and then he mentioned to me that my guy Damon, who he switched up, went to another gym, became a trader, switched up on me, that he had been experimenting with carnivore diet and he was interested in that. So then I ran into Damon at Lake Merritt. If you guys know Oakland, you know Lake Merritt, and we chopped it up for a minute, and it was just comparing notes on this whole carnivore diet thing, and very interesting to see the rise of that. We're gonna get into some different dynamics with that. And we're gonna pick his brain a little bit and see what he thinks about that. And you guys kind of know my position, but I'll give you some more gems along the way as well. Let me bring in my guy Damon. What's good, brother?
What's happening, man?
Yeah. All right. So we got some people coming in, the Rican, and I don't know if you can see the chat. I think this is your first time on StreamYard like this, but let me switch it up like that. Have you used StreamYard before?
No, I haven't, man. It's a new format for me.
Okay, yeah. I've been rocking with YouTube for years on this channel and been kind of switching it up. A few different topics over the years, but really, as you know, I'm getting older, developing myself. The health and fitness thing just takes over full blast. You know what it is.
Right.
I'm 47 next month, so I'm already just claiming that 47 notch. I know you are 50.
Yep.
The health and fitness thing. Just give some general thoughts on that, like the importance of health and fitness going into that. Half a century, old man, gray beard.
Right. I think it's been just seeing older folks, even in the Black community, friends from high school, white friends, Asian friends, seeing their folks, their parents, who I knew when they were in their 30s or, early to mid 40s, and the sicknesses that they've encountered as they got older. And it seems like what has been the norm is everybody staying away from red meat. It's lean chicken meat, chicken breasts, a ton of vegetables, things of the sort. But what I remember growing up, in the 80s, is the meat was the main thing on the plate. If you came from a two-family household where mom cooked or grandmother cooked, the meat was the main thing on the plate. Veggies were small but few. As kids, we didn't want to eat them. They tasted awful. We might have, had some rice or something like that. But most of the time, we were killing the meatloaf, the chicken, or the ribs, or whatever, and then we were out in the street.
Facts. Yeah, no, you painted it perfect because that was my exact upbringing. And that story, they sort of marketed to everybody, get away from, first it was low fat, right? And then it's
Right.
get away from red meat. And that's perfect because we're about the same age. So we've been able to kind of see that trajectory. And then I wanted to get your thoughts on this. Do you think being in the town, being in the Bay, do you see more of a push, especially relative to Black folks, where they say, you kind of need to embrace this more plant-based kind of lifestyle? Have you heard that?
Yes, this is a liberal area, so everything is kumbaya. We have a lot of our friends' parents were hippies, so it was fruit and living off the land and things of that sort. But when you go back and you look at them, when they're in their 70s, they don't look the part. They look malnourished. And this is coming from somebody who swallowed that Kool-Aid and was a vegan for 6.5 years. And I pushed it. And I was really sick. I listened to a doctor who told me my cholesterol was high. And I got scared and I went on this vegan kick, and I wasn't the same in the gym. I was bloated. You know, there's a spot that everybody knows in Berkeley called Mezzo's, and they make some of the best salads. But I could eat one of their huge salads and I would be hungry an hour later. I was always blocked up. You go to the bathroom, you make a bowel movement, and it's resembles an anthill. If the food was meant for you, if it was meant to heal you and to fuel you, why am I pooping it all out? It just didn't make sense to me. But I still never changed. I still kicked it for 6.5 years and was sick. 3 colonoscopies I had. But the main thing they tell you before you get it or before you go under is no veggies, no fruit, no nuts. And in your mind, you don't even question it. But you think like, hold up, you said meat was the problem. And then you realize that they tell you, well, hey, guess what? We don't want you to get blocked up because the veggies are the things that block you up. It just doesn't make sense at the moment. But you don't question it enough to stop.
Right. They tell you that right then going in for a procedure, but then the general consensus, the conventional logic is eat like this for your heart health, for whatever,
Right.
for longevity. They sold people on that. And I fell into that trap too. I don't think we talked about that because I didn't know you was running a sort of the vegan diet lifestyle for a while, because I did that too. I kind of wove in and out of vegan,
Right.
vegetarian, fell into the whole thing of, well, wait a minute. If the animals that we eat as a meat source eat the plants, why not just go straight to the plants? And was
Right.
just super ignorant. I
Right.
laugh at myself, eye roll now. The idea of, oh, duh, they
Not
have
realizing they have different stomachs than we have.
whole different types of digestion.
Right.
We can't just
100%.
go. It's like so laughable to think about. It's like, oh baby, you just, oh, bless your heart, you just didn't know you thought.
Right.
Obviously,
right.
we can't eat no grass. We can eat a cow. Cows eat the grass. Beef being one of the most nutrient dense possible foods a human can consume.
100%.
So that's interesting. So wow, 6 years vegan. So man, I started realizing, obviously I'm a little bit younger than you, but playing this game, avoid the red meat, believe in hype on that, and then even lower fat. And we was in the gym this whole time. I'm assuming you was in the gym the whole time when you was running the vegan lifestyle too.
100%. All the time. Sorry about that. Yeah. I mean, I wasn't strong anymore. I could rep out on 225 like nothing. But then all of a sudden, 225 felt like 400 pounds in my hand. Or say I didn't clear my messenger. Felt like 400 pounds in my hand. And it wasn't until I felt like everything was back to normal until I switched the diet.
Okay. I got to take the arrows on this because we treading into the water. People watch this later and want to come in, and we might get some people in the live chat right now like, no, you got to eat vegan and you can do it strong. Just eat more and supplement. Why? Damn it. Why don't you just supplement more? Why don't you just...
I tried that supplement too. But let me tell you, do you know how much it would cost to eat 120? No, I'm 200 and some pounds. So I'm 205 pounds. So 205 pounds, I would have to eat, a barrel of broccoli, or I'd have to spend $60 a week in powdered protein, just to get the same. But again, still never thinking of going to the source.
Yeah, man. No, I took that same L. I'm happy that I was smart enough, and I would say just reasonable enough, rational enough to stay objective and say, wait a minute. We need the nutrient density. And then when you think of nutrient deficiency over time, going into your 40s, they talk about male testosterone dropping off, all these different issues. And it's like, okay, the diet, what's the common thing? What are you eating? And again, I was able to stay pretty in shape, lean, going into my late 30s, into my 40s. But then it started tapering off, like, 42, 43-ish, like, hold on, kind of more skinny fat kind of look. It's not flowing right. And I refuse to be one of the guys that fall off. And I'm like, okay, have I created nutrient deficiencies trying to play this game?
Right.
And then the more I did the research, I was like, oh, that's exactly it.
I
And
love that term, skinny fat.
yeah, I'm not, because me, I'm 6'2", I'm on the taller side, so slimmer. Plus, man, I got a history of like metabolic damage I've done to myself. I don't know if you know, but I was like pretty heavy at one point before we even met, or this is like right before, back in the 24-hour days, Webster. Bro, at my heaviest, 6'2", right now, my walk around 195 on average. 195, 200 at
Which is
6'2".
perfect.
Say that again.
Which is perfect.
But at my heaviest, I think I told you this, and you was like, "Oh, remember I showed you the picture, bro." At 29, going on 30, at my heaviest, I'm hitting like 265, 270. Remember I
Right.
showed you them fat, chunky boy face
Yes.
pictures,
I couldn't believe it.
yeah,
But
yeah. I forgot I showed you that, but yes,
yeah.
it was all bad. So
But
then I
we
realized, even 16, 17 years later, coming back from that, when you damage your body like that, you got to really stay on top of it, especially approaching your 40s. And I'm fooling around deficient with the skinny fat kind of situation. Like, nah, I can't. I got to be extra careful.
right.
So I
Well,
decided I got to make some changes. But this is more about you than me. So I'm curious to know, what was the switch between experimenting vegan 6.5 years, 6 years, 6.5 years? What made you decide to turn a corner?
so long story short, had an older friend, Ethel Radzik, Oakland, met her at Pete's Coffee, became like my walking buddy during COVID, my movie buddy. She was a blessing. Um, she got sick with cancer. She asked me to take her to the hospital. Actually, no, I take that back. She asked me to take her to her dentist. And I drove her and picked her up. Dentist said that she had a lesion in her mouth and he thought it was cancer. So, and here's a woman that was still running the lake. She was fine. She just wasn't driving a lot. And she never drove on the freeway. So I think it was me taking her was us to go out and get some food where we'd have to get on the freeway and go to Berkeley or San Francisco or something like that. So she said, hey, let's make a day of it. Take her to the dentist. Turns out, ends up being cancer. They sent it over to Kaiser. It's stage 4 bone cancer. They want to put her on a fusion treatment, which is like a dummy down chemo. Now, here's this woman talking to us just like me and you were talking to each other right now. She doesn't have any, doesn't have a walker. She doesn't look like, she's in a wheelchair, anything of sort. She's getting around. Here's somebody who was walking the lake at 83 years old every day and would walk down from Piedmont, get her coffee at Pete's and do the lake. All of a sudden, fusion treatment, she's sleeping 23 hours a day. And I said, hold up. I started looking into cancer treatment. Now, she has a friend of hers, close friend of hers, who lives in Pennsylvania, who donates about $180,000 a year to the Mayo Clinic. We found somebody on YouTube who's a doctor, and he said that they had been doing studies on cancer. And cancer's fuel was sugar. It does a fermentation period where that's all it is. It's sugar, sugar, sugar will actually help to spread the cancer. I told her this. The friend said, hey, I was on some witchcraft, stuff, and to let it go. Well, of course, she wanted to live and she believed the doctors. And she started doing this treatment. All of a sudden, here's a woman who was on a vegan diet, but never really ate a lot during the day, was sucking down milkshakes and Jamba Juice like it was Tic Tacs.
Wow.
So I decided one day to go over to Whole Foods and I got her some pre-made meatloaf. And we did that for about a week. And all of a sudden she was ready to go to the movies. She had life. And then a couple weeks later, she was on her second treatment of the chemo. And all of a sudden she was back to sleeping again. Now she started getting really weak. She had a physical therapist come to the house. I watched them over FaceTime. She asked me to watch, make sure he was okay. She wasn't really trustworthy, people being in the house. I oversaw the physical therapy treatment. He was having her stand out of her chair with no hands. She did a great job. The physical therapist left and I went to go run the lake without my phone. I got home. She had called me from her iPhone. Her femur has snapped in half in her room. And she was on the floor in her room with blood in her ear. She had busted her eye and all that. I went straight to the house, got her, called the fire department. She went straight to Highland because Highland is the only hospital that does, like traumatic injuries other than, and Kaiser doesn't do it. So I had to watch them drill through her shin bone to pull her leg down until she had surgery the next day. And I started asking questions. I said, well, hey, what was going on with the fusion treatment for it to do this? And they said, no, it was the bone cancer. But no, what it really was is over time, she had a little kidney disease, and they wanted her less than 30 grams of protein a day. So as she got weaker, the bones were already weak and ready to snap. So they also told me that when they gave her a PET scan to find out where the cancer was in her body, and they wanted to give her another one. So when I asked the nurse, what do you give them for a PET scan? She said, we give her blue glucose. And that confirmed it all for me. That was all I needed to know. And I said, you know what? This is a bunch of bullshit. You know that sugar is the main cause of this, but you continue to let people do it. And then on top of that, people have the craving during chemo for more sugar. So they're just amplifying the sugar in their body while doing chemo. And I said, I had to change. And overnight, I changed. I went from being a vegan to keto for about a month and a half. And it was too hard to manage because they want you between 25 and 50 grams of carbs. Once you get the keto chocolate, you get the keto ice cream, you can't manage it. And then because of the flavor, it spikes your insulin up regardless. And then guess what? You've eaten a whole box of keto ice cream, bars or whatever, or the whole box of keto chocolates in one night. And then you've just blown it. You're not even in ketosis anymore. So then I said, you know what? I'm going to do the carnivore only. And as soon as I did the carnivore only, man, the weight just fell off. I had endurance out of this world in the gym. I think last year, what was like the icing on the cake, I started doing sprints at Piedmont High School and tore a hamstring. And I'm talking about like blood pooling in the back of my hamstring.
Oh.
And it just looked really bad, man. It just was black and blue. And all of a sudden, and within 24 hours, the blood was gone. Wow. So I knew that I was making so many white blood cells that it was just eating all the tissue up, and trying to repair it. Of course, it wasn't repaired in 24 hours, but a week and a half later, I ran the Beta Breakers. Now, it wasn't fast. It was a 10-minute mile. I didn't stop. I didn't eat that whole morning. I left the house at 204 pounds. And by the time I ate at 6 o'clock that night, I was 195. Now, some of that's water weight, but a lot of that was my body using my own fat as fuel to get through the entire day, which was absolutely amazing to me. What's that?
How many miles was that?
7.5 miles.
Okay. Yeah, we hit a lot of the questions that I already had. So I knew that was going to happen when you was like, your questions list. So obviously initial benefits, let's just go back over that. Just some of the general initial benefits. Obviously that recovery you had, the initial weight loss, but please expand on that.
Well, the weight loss was my body switching from carbs. So even with carbs, you have to keep fuel, eating them all day. Now I picked up cycling during COVID, and I would go out, no food, forget to drink water, might have a pastry, it's a coffee pastry a lifestyle, and that's just the community. Guys, will stop and do coffee, croissant, a donut, things of that sort, and they need, 30 to 60 grams of carbs, pros, 130 grams of carbs, just to get an hour, just to get through rides. Now, a few times I bunked, and bunked is where you depleted all your energy and nutrition in your body where you have to sit, get off the bike, you can't move, and if you sit down, you're going to fall asleep. And I've done that twice, trying to go out and wing it, this, that, and the other. But what happened was, once I switched to keto and I would go out because my body was burning fat, all of a sudden 60, 70-mile rides with just water and electrolytes would be easy. Now, I haven't seen lightning speed where you get this super lightning effect where you do with carbs, but you get the endurance, which to me seems a lot healthier than most of the guys I ride with who are overweight. And a lot of the people that I ride with, unless they're the pro guys that I know, a lot of them are overweight and obese. They have stomachs. Excuse me. They have stomachs. Some of the ladies, the same thing. It's just not working. You know, it becomes a hobby, but it's not something that's keeping them healthy where they're losing weight, because all you're doing is eating donuts and sugar. And then once you get off the bike, you're going to consume more than that because your body needs it.
So they're making themselves just, the preferred in the sense of not having that metabolic flexibility to go glucose, to go fat burning. And I mean, that's just wild, because you're talking about cyclist
And that's
community.
hard to do. That's hard to do. People say it, but that's hard to do, to get your body to switch over to burning fat.
Well,
That's
sure.
a
When
real
you're
science.
smashing hundreds of grams of carbs, especially from ultra processed sources, before we even get into that, you could eat pretty clean carb sources, but if you could doing 200, 300 grams of carbs a day and then try to switch over, that's going to take some doing. But I mean, when we get into the vast majority of people eating easily 60, 70% ultra processed food and their carb sources are coming from that, trying to switch over to some kind of, fat burning is going to be absolutely all bad. Keto flu, carnivore
Right.
flu, the switch over is ruthless.
I'm a believer of all carbs are bad. I don't think if it's ultra processed or healthy or the sort, I think it's all bad. I think our bodies were naturally built to run on fat. It's a better clean source. And if you look around, all the diseases that are now come from it.
Yeah, no, I mean, again, I'm a video guy. I come from sort of an objective standpoint where I'm doing almost like a investigative journalism kind of situation on it. And
As you should.
it's led me down this path of like, wait a minute. And the high level researchers, looking at a few different people and it, hearing, from weightlifting, whatnot. My uncle back in the 80s was lifting, had us, immersed in that all these years. But they talked about the macros, carbs, fats, protein. You got to have your macro ratios just right. And then more recently, getting into the whole carnivore space and some of these doctors and scientists saying, oh, well, yeah, there's no need for carbohydrates. There's no need for exogenous glucose because your body makes it on its own. And it's like, wow, I never heard that.
Right.
And, a lot of the bodybuilder kind of vibe is based on bodybuilders who are on, gear and whatnot, and they're using insulin spikes and different things. But the idea that when I really started hearing more doctors and scientists saying, well, yeah, you don't really need carbs. You don't really need carbs. You could just operate on fat and protein. I was like, well, this goes against what I've been hearing my whole life, what they told us in school. But I put it to the test myself, like going months at a time, as zero carb as I could be, and still putting myself through the ringer with training sessions from HIIT, high intensity interval, jump rope sessions to lifting to all that, and was like, wow.
Yes,
definitely had some electrolyte water situation I had to kind of deal with.
That was my issue too.
And I was, really running it up in ketosis for sure, because I was already doing a lot of fasting and getting into ketosis while I was still vegan vegetarian, which is even trickier, right? Because I'm eating almost all carbs, but I was doing a lot of intermittent fasting and HIIT cardio. And I was pushing myself into ketosis. And when I really started fasting more and tying these things together more, I think that's what kind of helped me reveal the nutrition deficiencies. But putting it all together, man, I don't want to make it too much about me, but it's so fascinating to hear what you're saying, especially with the cycling community. And you already know what it is. I talk about this on this channel a lot, like walking around Lake Merritt. I've done streams on this channel, walking around Lake Merritt. You look around, more and more people just overweight, But when you got cyclists that really be riding for miles like that are still, with the belly, and it's like that midsection fat, the pear shape, what's going on with the excess body fat? Maybe their hormones are messed up, more cortisol, it's trapping the fat, visceral fat. But talk more about that because that's real interesting. They riding, but then stop for coffee. What the picture you painted there is very interesting.
So most of the time, everybody is not doing American breakfast. And when I say American breakfast, and me, I'm talking about like some bacon and eggs and a half a piece of toast is what we remember in the 80s. That was the quick thing. Kids might have got the cereal, but what you saw in movies, Dad's plate was sunny side up eggs, some bacon, a sausage, and maybe one slice of toast with some butter on it. And he took a bite of that and ran out the house. Now we go to Starbucks, it's sugar in the coffee because of the milk or the cream or the vanilla shot. Then it's a pastry. Even with the kids, it's the same thing. So it's insulin spikes right from the gate. You get to work, you got a protein bar in the desk, you're eating that. You get a handful of nuts. You pass by somebody else's desk who's got a jar of M&Ms. You take a
vending machine food.
Right. So you do that aspect. But then everybody goes, carbs are the jet fuel. So they're consuming gummy bears, M&Ms, goo gels, which is nothing but sugar and all kind of crap. And you're doing this for 15 to 20 minute spikes so you can get up a hill, so you don't bonk. There's a race that happens every year. It's called the Unbound. It's an Unbound gravel race. I might be getting the name wrong right quick. But there's 3 levels of the race. There's a 100 miler, it might be a 55 now, but a 100 miler, a 200 the pros do. So that's 200 miles they got to do. And then there's a 350 XL. And this is in Kansas. So it's relatively flat. But the 350, most of the time, it's not a pro person. It's, a weekend Joe that rides a lot, this, that, and the other. They have to fuel their whole race themselves. There's nobody that's assisting them. So a lot of people strategically hit grocery stores or hit the gas station to grab whatever junk they can get. What really surprised me is the woman that won last year for 2024, she put on 9 pounds by the time the race was over. And we're talking 350 miles on a bike, nonstop.
And she
other than
weight.
Grab food.
And she gained weight.
She gained weight.
I just want to make sure I'm clarifying this to the people listening in the chat and later. She rode 350 miles, but was stopping off to get foods that created a situation where she actually gained weight at the end of riding 350 miles.
Because her body just ultimately got to a point that said, this is not sustainable. We can't just burn it all like that. And it's Coca-Cola, gummy bears, all of that stuff. And her body just said, you know what? It's stored now. We're storing this all. You're eating for survival. So what I realized last year when I thought about that, I said, you know what? This is like a bear. A bear eats like this when it comes out of hibernation. We're more like bears. This is the better comparison of humans to animals and what goes on in the wild. Bears come out, they eat moose, they eat salmon, they eat berries, they eat whatever they can eat. Other bears. Grizzlies will go attack black bears and eat them. Right. So then what are they ultimately going to do? They're going to fast for 5 months while they sleep during winter because they can't get food during the winter. And that's nature. That's nature. You got, you have deep snow and bears don't have the legs for it. So a bear can't chase a moose through that. So it just seems like nature just said, you know what? We're going to put you to sleep for 5 months. And they'll hide underneath your cabin. They'll go, dig out a den. find a cave or whatever, and they're night for 5 months, and they live off their fat. And it's another reminder of the guy who's in the Guinness Book of World Records, who was 471 pounds, who didn't eat anything for a whole year and lived off of coffee and electrolytes for a whole year off his own fat.
So this is interesting, right? They told us even back in high school, the idea of, obviously it's largely known, fat is essentially energy storage, to put it simple. But then we have the situation of excess body fat, obesity rates going up.
Right.
But then people act clueless, or the medical industry acts clueless of, what do we do about this? How is this happening? And it's like, well, wait a minute. If you're eating in such a way where it's this much carbs, the macros are in such a way where it's this much protein, this much fat, this much carbs. And I actually do make a little bit of a lot of a demarcation between what would be considered as carbs from fruit or vegetables relative to ultra processed food. I think that's far more worse, right? Because the whole metabolic energy it takes to deal with that is just on a whole other level. Because all the synthetic stuff, the oils. I don't know if you went down the rabbit hole.
The seed oils are the worst. They're definitely seed oils. If I had went a week without brushing my teeth, being on a carnivore diet, I would never have one drop of yellow plaque on my teeth. But if I was eating veggies or fruit or taking in highly processed food, ultra processed foods, and seed oils, I would have calcium deposit all over my teeth. Now, I don't understand how the medical field hasn't seen this, or they don't want to, but this is the same calcification that we get in our arteries, and if you look at the sugar molecule from the fake to the real, it's the exact same. But the doctors don't question it, because the doctors go, well, I haven't done any science on this. And they trust science from 60 and 70 years ago. And that's it. That's the basis. That's the foundation of how we got to this point. And it's not correct. If you actually learn how to read, and this is for the public, if they actually go out and learn how to read a study or a trial, and you realize that, hold up, this doesn't even add up. Doesn't even add up. How could somebody pass on this, or to the point where say, hey, you know what? This is not right. Let's question things. But guess what? You question it, you get fired. It's not policy, and we don't have the doctors that had the office down the street anymore. Everybody's getting paid by 2 or 3 institutions across the country. You would usually go to, if you broke your leg, you go to your doctor. He had his own office down the street. And he'd tell you, hey, we're going to meet at such and such hospital because he's renting that operating room to fix your leg or something like that. But he was your family doctor. We don't have those anymore. We don't have the critical thinkers anymore like that, because everybody's following one script. And that's the problem I have with this whole situation. And that's why when I tell people who are not on the carnivore diet, at least stay away from the seed oils. If I had a jar of beef tallow, and I use that, which is what I use to cook my steaks. But when I cook my steaks with beef tallow, that stuff gets on everything. It burns and it floats in the air, and it settles on your refrigerator. It settles on your hood of your stove. It settles on your clean dishes. It settles everywhere. But if you cook and you use vegetable oil, that stuff doesn't even move. You can hold a flame to it, and it does not burn. It'll cook your food, but it doesn't burn. Now, if you can imagine what that is like in your arteries, we used to use beef tallow. McDonald's used it, but a lot of the fine restaurants still use it. They wouldn't dare to mess their food up with using vegetable oil or some seed oil, stuff like that. You go to Ruth's Chris in San Francisco, they cook your French fries in beef tallow.
Yeah, I was like ignorant to that whole situation for years, especially obviously avoiding red meat. Um, and really just, not understanding the importance of that, hearing about inflammation, uh, oxidation, not even to really understand what that meant. And I get it now. When I look more into it, I was like, wow, okay, now that I understand it, how to explain it to people without it sounding like some kind of rocket science. But just the way the oils break down, how they different oils versus different fats work at different temperatures and how they react with your body. And when you put these oils, these refined seed oils, ultra processed, like literally taking seeds and compressing them and mixing them in with certain chemicals to
Like motor oil.
purify them. Yeah, you're ultimately getting into some like motor oil kind of substance, and it operates like how real fats actually work. And we talk about tallow. That tallow is actually rendered beef fat. So we're talking
Right.
about fat, lard, pork fat. When you start understanding how this works, and I think back OG with my aunts and grandma back in the day, where they would have the actual fat chilling on a stove, and then kind of got people to switch more over to Crisco, canola oil, these kind of things, and understanding, oh, it has the same kind of texture, viscosity, but what is the actual chemical makeup of these things? And you go down a rabbit hole into the actual chemical bonds of these things and how they break down. And you put these fats in your body, and essentially your body takes these fats and adds them to your fat, but they're still breaking down, and then they're causing these oxidation end products, and it's further breaking down, and it's create little mini reactions in your body that are creating this other free
Acne.
radical damage,
Right.
and then your
Eczema.
body's inflamed because it's trying to constantly heal that, so you're always doubling down. So imagine a year of you eating these seed oils that break it down in your body from these mostly ultra processed foods, right? Where you're getting seed oil, so they have more shelf life. Learning more about this stuff, I was just blown away to the point where it's like, oh no, I got to cut out the seed oils because it takes years for it to even get out of your body, right?
Right.
Because it literally infuses into your fat cells, and pretty much all of your cells have fat in them, right?
Yep.
Aside from just the actual fat cells, all of your cells have types of fat. Your brain is made up of fat. So you think you got to like recycle that all out of your body, is so you got to stop now so you can give it time to get out. So the more you
Right.
keep
And
doing
that's
it,
by
the more
burning it.
you kicking the can down the road.
Right.
And I think to the point of the whole carnivore diet situation, while it's so interesting, and I think people got kind of culty with it, and they don't want to say it's an elimination diet, but I'm like, why not embrace that? You're eliminating a whole lot of other shit out of your diet that you should not be eating, and you're getting high nutrients in the form of essential fatty acids,
Yep.
essential amino acids. And if you cut out the carbs and allow that to manage your blood sugar, your insulin spikes, then you put yourself in a fat burning state while replenishing proper fats and proteins in your body. You're literally building your body out of the substrates it needs to build itself.
Yep.
It's a no brainer. So when I understood it, I was like, wait a minute. After all these years of big bowls of kale and lentil beans and all this type of craziness, it's like thinking I'm doing something. I thought I was dumb
Oh,
because I was like, I'm still in good shape. I'm lean. My hit is good, but my lifts were falling off. But I was like, I ain't trying to be some super big meathead. I'm already 6'2", whatever. I don't need to be super big. I'll just stay lean like a boxer, whatever. But the strength is falling off, skinny fat, fall off the diet for a minute. It ain't right. Turn that corner, bro. Because I know we talked about it. You're basically about the same time as me. Like September will be 2 years. Switch the game up. Went high fat, high protein, carnivore diet. Moving in and out of kind of a keto with the
mhm.
keto strips. Knowing I'm in keto, fasting, intermittent fasting, doing like multiple day fasts. Just throwing them in there. Just throwing my body different things, letting it heal. Do that autophagy thing, right? Let it
Yep.
clear itself out.
Which is amazing.
Because, bro, at 47, I'm like healing years, decades of damage that I've done to myself. Plus, I used to throw parties and whatnot. So there was late nights drinking and eating all the
Yep.
way, messing it up. So I had to come back and fix all that. Now, all I do is work and work out, do video stuff and just work out, just be training. Uh, so it's interesting to think about. Sure, elimination diet, just have the fat and protein, which your body is literally made out of, and then obviously the micronutrients. But once you understand that, it just becomes obvious. Of course, you're going to start having all these things heal. You're going to be able to recover from a torn tendon or I forgot what you said it was, a torn hamstring.
Yep.
Your energy levels are going to go up. You're getting all the excess body fat off and all of the toxins that sit in the fats, right?
Yep.
Talk about it. I know you know.
I think when the crazy thing is knowing that I had oily pores, right? And it was always a thing. You know, I could do this, you know, blah, blah, blah. My pores are oily. You know, pimples, you know, back of my arm from working out, things of that sort, not knowing it was the food and switching after weeks, and to know all of a sudden my pores and my just dried up. You know, nothing coming out, no more pimples. I had a black pinky toenail. My mom had the same thing. It looked like, I mean, it's probably as black as my hat on my head. I never wanted to wear flip-flops because I had like this black, crusty pinky toenail. My mom had the same thing. My mom ate badly. I mean, it was 3-piece all white, Cajun rice and a biscuit 2 or 3 times a week, and a pint of ice cream. I mean, I was walking Lake Merritt at 9, going to get KFC for my mom and Baskin Robbins for her, and it'd be DVDs and that on a Friday night. But after 2 months of being on a carnivore diet, my pinky toenail went as clear as the one on my hand. So I think that was like a defining moment of like, hold up, like this is really healing everything, you know. And then the micronutrients come from the liver, you know, where I was getting everything I needed. I think the only thing that was the rough part was understanding that I needed to have these micronutrients and the magnesium and the potassium to keep from getting cramps. Now, Paul Saladino is somebody that we know who was promoting the carnivore diet, who got off the carnivore diet and is now implemented back to fruit and honey. This is, you know, just like the Atkins diet. He did the same thing. He was promoting it and then started implementing carbs back into his diet. Now, I'm not a fan of that, but here's somebody who was very thin in the beginning, and he said he couldn't handle the cramps. Do I think that if he'd have stuck with it a little bit longer and managed his micronutrients, he would not have gone back to honey and fruit, which I definitely don't believe that's animal-based to have honey and fruit, because you're more or less just going back to sugar again, which you're getting from this man-made fruit. But I think, you know, the hard part is just understanding that the cramps are going to come until you manage it. And then you realize, hey, this is the same thing I was doing back when I was bike riding, not drinking enough water, you know, not taking the electrolytes that I needed to be successful in this. And then all of a sudden it went from 2 to 3 times a night getting up to urinate to 0. Now, sometimes I'll drink late at night in water, and I might have to get up in the middle of the night. My girlfriend is the same way. She might have to get up once. She usually gets up at like 3:30, goes back to bed, gets, you know, for a few more hours. But I'll get up maybe once a night because I've had a lot to drink before. I'm not somebody that cuts it off. Now, everybody's now saying cut off the water a few hours before bed, which is what they've been telling us when we're on an American diet anyway, because, you know, you'll have to pee, but I don't get the cramps anymore. The leg cramps are gone. The Charlie horses are gone. That's scary at first, because you go, hold up, maybe I'm doing something wrong. Maybe this diet isn't right. But if you're not getting the electrolytes that you need, which is just like the animals in the wild, we know that elephants will walk to this one pond in Africa and they all go to it, and it's nothing but salt water, and they will drink a ton of it. They sit there and they'll drink for hours of this stuff and keep walking. So when you look at it like that, you go, okay, hold up, this is the natural order, needing to get the right nutrients in the body, the potassium, the magnesium. I've also introduced creatine back in my diet, which now helps my muscles to fuel with water. So when I'm doing these long bike rides, I have the energy, the water storage in my body where my muscles aren't depleted before I get on the bike. That's going to be 5,000 to 6,000 feet of elevation climbing or 60 or 70 miles.
Yeah, you bring up a very interesting point. And I've heard people talk about this, getting into the whole carnivore diet thing, super duper low carb like that, especially with myself fasting, but then being active as well. There's some interesting dynamics where your body has to change over, right? We know the human body is extremely adaptable. It has to change over to these things. And then again, I think, let me look at these data points. Okay, I'm doing this more approaching, let's say, 44, 45. Most of my life, I haven't eaten like this, where I'm eating this much meat, right? This much animal products, this much in and out of ketosis, quite this much with this level of activity and consuming this much protein. This is after years of avoiding this much red meat, right? So I get how, because I sure enough was having the crazy cramping situation, working out, legs cramping up, arms cramping up, ridiculous, abs cramped up. And I knew it was a thing. I knew people had talked about it, so I wasn't that surprised to experience it. But fast forward to now, I have way less cramping like that. Like regardless of how active I am. Like in other words, I think it is like an adaptation phase. Now I've heard other carnivore influencers talk about this because it's almost like it's an ongoing thing where more and more people are getting hip to the game on how different people's bodies are reacting to this whole carnivore diet thing as they're doing it more. Because, you know, vast majority of, let's just say, Americans are eating crazy, crappy diets. So it's almost like a live experiment that's happening over time to get bigger and bigger numbers, bigger and bigger data points and sample size. It's like a big case study that's kind of evolving and getting bigger, where people are kind of comparing notes. So I realized over time, okay, my body is adapting to where I need even less salt than I needed, you know, a year ago.
Right.
Less, you see what I'm saying? I'll need less of the electrolyte amount. So I was thinking, oh, I need to keep up with that, but then realizing, oh, I don't need that. Another variable I threw in the mix too is how active I am when I'm back-to-back months in the Bay versus I've been spending the last year in Las Vegas. I don't know if we talked about that. So I'm in Vegas a lot, and it's hella hot in the summer, obviously, as you know. But when you're here for back-to-back days, it's hot all day, all night. You're putting out that much more hydration. So you kind of got to offset that. So that was a variable I had to make up for as well. Most people, locals in Vegas, be in the house all day, AC blowing 24/7. Like, it's crazy. So I had to account for that. So just being more cognizant of all this stuff, how I'm training, how the diet and nutrition is working, tying it in with manipulating these macros like that, and just seeing the adaptations happen over time. It's super interesting, right? Like to see the power of that and realize, man, best shape I've ever been, leanest I've ever been, and just healing from damage that I've done. You know, speaking for myself, still healing from damage that I've done. It's just so interesting. One of the questions I was going to ask you, and I think we already have the answer, but I'm going to ask you just because it's on the list. How long will you stay with it?
I think this is life. I think this is life, man. I think knowing that these kids around me are now getting diabetes at 8 and 9 years of age, seeing and knowing that I have family and friends who are sick, who are overweight, who are struggling, especially Black women who are overweight. We're the number one most obese. Black males behind that. Heart disease, number one killer of us. What's the point? What's the point of Taco Tuesday when I know that Taco Tuesday is going to put this weight right back on me? It's a social outing with friends to have, chicken and waffles worth, a 13-pound gain if I break the diet. It's just not worth it. Not worth it to me. I want to do this. This is longevity for me. And at 50, I got my first kid coming, and this kid is being conceived on a carnivore diet. My girlfriend is on a carnivore diet. She's 15 weeks into her pregnancy, and the baby is super healthy to the point where Kaiser wants to do a study on us because of the diet. So, when it comes to that, I'm a believer that this is life, and I don't think I'll ever change. I think that if the country switches over and gets back to having meat and low carbs, we'll all be here a long time. And me having a kid at 50, I at least need to be here another 30 to 40 years to see my kid in action in his life. And if he decides to have kids on his own, I want to be around. I want to be a part of that. And if I can make it to 100 and stay in shape, I'm going to do that. And being on a well-balanced diet on sugar and carbs is not going to keep me here. I'm going to end up less muscle, not wanting to be active in the gym, and I'll just fall to the wayside. And if my goals are to be here, I can't let that happen.
To be here and be ready and as strong as possible.
Right.
Congrats on that. I'm glad you brought that up because I was going to bring up your new emergence as a father. Congrats to that. It's extremely interesting that you said you're a lady, carnivore as well. Kaiser is like, I'm sure they're already hip to the game. No, more and more people are adopting this carnivore lifestyle, right, and they know the benefits of it. And before coming on, we kind of talked about the ramifications, the implications for more people adopting a carnivore lifestyle, and how, you've got to be careful with what we say, especially on YouTube. But if a lot of ailments are being treated, or, that's bad business for some
100%
out there.
100%. You got to think about it. One ribeye steak is more nutrient than all the vegetables in the grocery store. So just think, we have all these farmers, who used to sell meat most of the time. There was chicken, pigs, and cows on a farm. Everybody switched over to it's veggies, corn, all this other stuff. But just think what that would do to the economy if everybody said, you know what? I'm done with this. I'm over to the meat section now, and I'm going to stay over there. That would crash the economy. You got to think about how many companies are invested in food, and how much money is that? And how many of us have stocks invest, stocks with these companies? But the crazy thing is now the news is meat is at an all-time high for the first time in U.S. history. So that means people are switching over and realizing that it's not about a balanced diet anymore. It's about meat first, and red meat at that. Now, don't get me wrong. I go to the grocery store and I see people all the time. They're overweight. They got the spandex on. They're going right to the lean chicken meat. But what they have to realize is most of these companies feed their chickens corn. So you're almost getting the seed oils and all the BS right in their skin because of the fact that they're not outside grazing and eating bugs and getting the protein and all that. It's these saline solutions that they're putting in them, and along with even feeding them corn feed.
Right. The feed's not right. So if they're not eating their species appropriate diet,
right,
they're not even building their bodies with the right nutrients.
They're just as us.
Them, then you obviously are not getting the right nutrients, because it's not the food chain isn't chaining. The chain ain't chaining.
Right. 100%.
Yeah, no, I love it, man. Well versed in it, and I'm so interested. I know we talked about that before we came on, but we definitely got to come back and talk about that animal documentary. And then I definitely want to bring you back, and if possible, we'll bring your lady back, because we got to talk about this, because we got an interesting scenario where in real time, somebody I've known for a good decade and a half, new father at 50, which is just interesting in and of itself.
Right. Well, you definitely got to talk to my girl. Like she's a nurse in the city. She's been doing it 7.
Wow, she's a nurse.
She's a nurse in the city. Yeah.
Whoa.
She's a nurse in the city in the TL at that.
Wow.
So she has to deal with all the drug addictions, all the bad food, all of the above. Like, she's dealing with that on a constant. and she's seeing these people who are passing away in front of her and all that. So she's seen it firsthand. But the crazy thing is she picked up biking around Christmas time, and she's probably been on 12 bike rides since then. She crashed, had a few crashes, and had to pick herself back up, but got right back on the bike. But dude, this weekend alone, we wanted to do a 68-mile loop in Los Gatos, and went through Bear Creek, through Santa Cruz, up through Capitola. She did 53 miles of it. Now, we started late, so the last 10 or 13 miles of the ride is 11 miles uphill. And it was getting too late after stopping, a few times to get water and stuff. But this woman did 53 miles on a bike on 2 Slim Jim beef sticks and 4 bottles of water. So that's no carbs, her own fat, and 2 Slim Jims. It wasn't Slim Jim, but it was somebody's, beef stick, but we grabbed 2 of those in Bear Creek, and that was 25 miles or 27 miles into the ride with 4,000 feet of elevation at 15 weeks pregnant.
How long has she been running Carnivore? Because she's obviously adapted.
Like 7, probably just before Christmas.
Okay.
And she lost 35 pounds in 5 weeks.
Yeah, no, running it like that, because, people are going to hit this sort of fat adaptation phase at various times, but that's directly relative to how active you are, because you've got to force the issue. But I mean, you guys are riding like that, and I'm sure it's probably training, hitting the gym as well.
Oh no, we're in the gym. We're in the gym 24/7. Today was leg day. She did 215 on her. She did 5 sets on the squat rack, and her last set was 215 for 2. Like I said, at 15 weeks pregnant.
Carnivore, fat adapted.
Yep. And getting the strength from the protein.
Yeah.
I cook her steak, and I cook her steak. It's either steak or ground beef. I found chicharron, which ends up having me snack a lot. So I think I put on them 3 or 4 pounds off the chicharron. We found a nice spot on Fruitvale. I have to slow up on that. But it's usually a pound of ground beef. I cook her 4 eggs scrambled or sunny side up, hot sauce. I put it in her jar. She eats it at lunch around 1:30, and she doesn't eat anything else the rest of the day.
Nice. Yeah, I got to come get a workout in with you when I get back in the Bay. I'm in Vegas now, but we got a link at a gym session in or something. But I want to get on the bike rides too. I don't know if my bike is set up for that. I got the little fixed wheels, little street bike kind of set up. You got gears and whatnot, right? Because you hit
but I mean, we can definitely do the path. There's always a path. We can go to my buddy's coffee shop, open air in Richmond. A lot of the cyclists stop there. We can do that and come back. That'll be like a 19, 20 mile round trip at a nice slow pace, and talk about. We call it zone 2.
Yeah, no, I'm with that, and I hit that fasted because I pretty much train fasted anyway. As soon as I shut this down, I'm about to go get some workout in. Well, actually, I did hit some eggs and some ground beef, but still low carb carnivore meal.
Right.
Already know what it is.
I know
that's what's up, man. I don't want to keep this too long. There's so many more things I want to ask you, but that's all the more reasons we got to keep bringing these back. I already knew it was dope linking with you. I knew this was going to be a dope interview, but man, this was absolutely amazing. I can't wait to listen to watch this back myself. But definitely more we got to tap in on. We're going to circle back. So just for everybody watching, we're going to come back with my guy Damon. We're going to talk with him and his lady for sure, but then also want to talk about that animal documentary you was talking about, because I'm
which is number 1 on iTunes right now.
Okay, we go definitely check that out. But yeah, man, I wish you had. So you got to get in the game, man. I'm about to be on you. You got to come up with a low-key carnivore channel or some kind of fitness channel, because you're into the fitness. It's just a fitness channel in general. But keep it going, because Kaiser wants to do a study on y'all situation. That's something that people want to follow along with, and
especially in the Black community for one. And I'm all for everybody, but the Black community is hurting for one, definitely hurting with our food choices. We got a lot of people who are on EBT. Everything is a lot of us don't have the money to do all the things that the other cultures do or races do. When it comes to camping and surfing and doing all this stuff that costs a lot of money. This is another reason why Black kids are not Black kids allowed to play a lot of baseball. But we do a lot of things around food. So our social outings are, whatever brunch after church, or whatever drinking at the club, or steak restaurant and things of that sort. And then we order these big plates, and then we feel like we have to eat them, and then it becomes a chain reaction throughout the week of doing the exact same thing with cheaper food. And then the weight's there, and then we have women who are depressed, who are overweight, who don't look the same as they did in high school, because this stuff is actually changing their DNA. So there isn't the feeling good of being able to look the part to attract somebody that's going to love you for life. So we definitely need to come back to this to try to make this better and to heal our community. And that's why I'm an advocate. I try to talk to somebody in the grocery store every time I go in, and even if they don't want to hear it, I get it. But I also try to give a hug. I try to, I make it a point to talk to at least somebody Black every time I go in the grocery store, and also whoever might have a basket full of, juice and veggies and no meat, and and I pick their brain, and then I hopefully I say things that make them think, and try to help. I'm not getting anything from this, but I'm a very emotional guy, and I see the problem. My mother passed away at a very heavy weight, and she was very depressed. And we didn't find her for 4 days in her room, where she had a heart attack, all because everybody told her that she needed to lower her cholesterol and get on a statin pill, which ultimately killed her, because that gave her a heart attack. Cholesterol is good, and to know that we're here in the Bay Area and the most liberal school is the reason for this. Cal Berkeley and Ansel Keys, the one scientist everybody believed, that said cholesterol was bad for us. And here we are at this problem. So whatever I can do to help, I'm going to do it.
Let me ask you this. I'm going to ask you this one more thing to kind of take us into overtime a little bit, but this is something we can connect on, because, I had to run some years back where I was throwing a bunch of events and whatnot. So, I have a love-hate relationship with the idea of the nightlife party stuff.
Right.
And that's still a big thing now, but there's still people from back in the day when we was out and about, and, we had day parties, nighttime parties. Yep. We'd be turned up the whole weekend.
100%.
Stuff popping off, just cool cultural stuff, or cool, just totally just fuck off fun stuff. But there's still a lot of that going. Oakland is big on this festival, this thing. Let's go to the lake here. Let's go here. Let's go over to the city. And there's whole like a downtown Oakland kind of community of folks that always know, and we're gonna pull up here and it's all hugs and everything. What do you think about that? As far as how have you had to change your lifestyle? How does changing your diet lifestyle impact your willingness to go out versus? What do you think about that?
Well, to be honest, we do occasionally go out. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm a big fan of house music, so I love vocals. I listen to R&B a lot. I listen to a little bit of everything a lot. But when I go out, it's a bottle of water, seltzer water. I can sip on that. Conversations are deeper when you go out. When you take a break from getting on the dance floor and you want to talk to friends, you have deeper conversations than it's an alcohol conversation where it's a bunch of BS. I'm with somebody, but it turns you into a werewolf sometimes, and then you come off wild and crazy, or you're not paying attention to your surroundings, but then when you think about it, you go, how can any of these businesses survive unless they were selling it? You don't want to hurt anybody because this is somebody's dream. But at the end of the day, when you think about it, you go, you're just killing each other. It's not right. But I definitely am a fan of still going out. I go to a lot of concerts. I just don't get the drinks. I'll eat before, or I'll choose where I want to eat, afterwards, and pick that so it accommodates the carnivore diet. But my best friend now is carbonated water, and maybe a little bit of lime, and that's it. And it suits me, and I have more energy. I'm not sitting down tired. You know, I got energy to go all night on the dance floor. And then when it's all over with, I can go home. I'm not looking for the hamburger joint. You know, I'm not looking for, you know, an open In-N-Out or something like that to just to eat on because I've had so much sugar from the alcohol that I think that I'm hungry. No, you're not hungry, dude. You ate all day. You know?
Bruh. Back in the day, I mean, go out drinking, that buzz drinking, the food is just like 10x good because oh
Right.
man,
10x
I'm
good.
well versed in that.
Yep.
Yeah, drinking. Man, I always flash back on the event days, the have a good night, and the bartenders was like, forget the drink tickets, we just passing out shots and or closing up late at night,
Right.
counting out the money or whatever, shots. Then where we gonna go eat, and just thinking about the damage I did to my body in that block of time. I had a good solid 2-3 years back to back. Oh, multiple events, late nights, and just the poor sleep. You already know that just
Poor
exacerbates the
sleep,
whole
man.
thing.
Poor sleep. Like the worst.
Yeah.
Or you're messed up for the next day and you're not present for a
Right.
Saturday, or you're not present for a Sunday.
Right.
You know, the
Right.
only 2 days of the week you got off and you couldn't enjoy hiking or going for a bike ride because you just slept in
Yes.
the entire day with a hangover, and now you look like crap.
And then back at work on Monday, like extra
Right.
feel like the case of the Mondays. Yeah, I've been there.
Yeah.
Are we gonna shut this down, bro? I super appreciate it. We definitely gonna have you
Man,
back.
I appreciate it.
And I'm about to be bugging you because this was so dope. We need to see more of this out of you and your lady. We're gonna talk behind the scenes. But I'm gonna run this. Stick around. I'm gonna drop you down. I'm gonna run this outro, and then we gonna actually. I'm fumbling with this thing. Yeah, just stick around.
Okay.
Everybody in the chat, this is my guy Damon from Oakland, known as brother for a while. Carnivore diet, just health. You know, I'm 47, he's 50, about to be a father. Health and fitness just has to be the move. So that's exactly why we want to push the issue on this stuff and have these discussions. Just some grown man shit.
Yes.
All right, y'all.